let's just speculate for a moment here, shall we? We know that the Apollo moon rocks, brought back by Apollos 11 and 12, were made available to the Soviets. And to America's then 55 kilograms, Luna 16 only picked up about 105 grams. Or did it? Knowing that the USSR did exaggerate about some of their technical capabilities in the space field, and also knowing that they had access to the Apollo samples, how do we know that Russia didn't simply scrape 105 grams off a moon rock from Apollo and then pass it off as something that they collected? If this is what they did, then it is no wonder why the American and Russian samples would be identical.
Identical? That's easy to disprove, but why bother? Whether the Soviets gathered their own lunar samples or somehow concocted their samples from what NASA supposedly gave them, it would have no bearing at all on whether the Apollo moon rocks are real or not. I'm not quite sure where Jared was going with this particular red herring, but let's dissect his claim anyway. First, it would take more than simply scraping fragments from one of Apollo's moon rocks to create something that could pass for the regolith samples brought back by Luna 16. Notice the abundance of those tiny watery glass spherules in the right-hand picture? Those wouldn't just drop out of the igneous rock that Jared shows in the left-hand picture. Actually, I'm surprised that Jared put these two pictures together to begin with. As for Jared's claim that the Luna 16 samples were identical to Apollo samples, the scientists who actually analyzed those samples would disagree. There's an excellent resource available on the Johnson Space Center's website called the Handbook of Lunar Soils, compiled by Dr. Richard Morris in 1983. This handbook is a complete catalog of the material properties of all non-core samples of soil returned by the Apollo missions. It contains all the soil sample reports, including this one on soil sample number 10002, prepared by Dr. Ursula Marvin and her team at Harvard in 1971. This sample report lists the weight percentage for the major elements and the ppm for trace elements, and is typical for all the Apollo 11 samples. The iron oxide is 15.34% by weight, titanium oxide is 7.75% by weight, and thorium is about 1.9 ppm by weight. In 1998, Dr. Randy Korolev wrote a paper summarizing these three element weight percentages from the handbook into two simple charts, which include data for all the Apollo and Luna missions, as well as a handful of lunar meteorites. The values we just read from the handbook for soil sample number 10002, iron oxide 15.34%, titanium oxide 7.75%, and thorium 1.9 ppm, are plotted in the little blue box for Apollo 11 on these charts. It's rather obvious from Randy's chart that Luna 16 samples have an iron oxide weight percentage almost identical to the Apollo 11 and Apollo 12 samples. But the titanium oxide weight percentage is different between the Luna 16 and the Apollo 11 samples, and the ppm of thorium is different between the Luna 16 and the Apollo 12 samples. In other words, although they have similar chemical compositions, the Luna 16 samples don't exactly match either of the two groups of Apollo samples available at the time, and a blend of the two Apollo samples would differ from the Luna 16 samples in both the titanium oxide and thorium concentrations. So, no, the Luna 16 samples are not identical to any of the Apollo samples. In fact, each of the missions seem to have their own particular signature that distinguishes them from the others. But what's fascinating about the analysis done in the early 70s is if you plot Randy's average titanium oxide weight percentages of the Apollo and Luna samples against the Clementine 415 nanometer to 750 nanometer ratio reflectance values, you get a remarkable correlation. Question: how did NASA know how much titanium oxide to put in their fake moon samples back in the 70s to correlate with future analysis that would use remote filtered images from Clementine's UV-Vis camera in 1994, combined with radiometric techniques developed after 1995, technologies that hadn't even been dreamed of in the 70s? You'd think that if the dudes who faked the lunar soil samples were that smart, they would have gotten the stars in the pictures and the craters under the limbs right. Huh? Ciao, moon hoax conspirators, wherever you are.